function of, what we see from departments and the final revenue projections.
Okay, Mr. Peterson?
Thank you, Ms. Chairman. I was just wondering, you mentioned something about the mayor was asking departments to try to trim another 1% somehow. Is that still in the works, or are they trying to do that, or?
Yes, at the beginning of the budget process, and I reported on this at our last meeting here, that we asked departments to identify efficiencies of 1% to address this gap. And some departments may not be able to achieve 1%. As a matter of fact, some departments are proposing increases rather than a decrease. And the mayor is evaluating that, and it will all be evaluated on a comprehensive basis in regard to what is best for the city. For example, some departments may go up 0.5%, and other departments might go down 3% in order to meet the overall gap. But that's the whole process that we go through, is trying to look at all of the department changes relative to the mayor's goals.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions? Okay, I have another. Oh, Mr. Trainee, go ahead.
Lucinda, looking at this budget revenue forecast shows our tobacco tax dropping about $300,000. Is that normal fluctuation, or do we have a problem with it?
Okay, so that is item number 4. So should we move to item number 4?
Not yet, because I have one other question.
Just
Yeah.
a concern when we get down to it.
Okay.
If you don't mind holding off, Mr. Trainee, because I have one more question. Okay. And then the request, I guess that's what I'll call it, to departments to find a 0.5% savings in their 2014 budget. How's that moving along?
That's moving along really well. The adjustment has already been incorporated into team budget, so it is reflected for all of the departments. And as a part of the conversation with the mayor in regard to their 2015 budget, they are also sharing with the mayor specifically what savings they are using for 2014. And if you recall, the objective of that was to create enough fund balance so that we could fund police and fire academies with one-time money for 2015. Because normally, in the budget process, because of the requirement to balance revenues with expenses, you can't anticipate and use one-time money unless you for sure know it is there, which is the reason why I put that 0.5% in, because then we can count on it.
Okay, I really appreciate the explanation that you just gave as to why, because I don't remember hearing that before. But, maybe I just missed it. But, so I really appreciate knowing that it's for police and fire academy next year. Thank you, Ms. Mahoney. Okay, number 4, MOA financial status.
I want to qualify something.
Sure.
That's my opinion, but it's ultimately the mayor's decision. Okay.
After 31 years, I'm pretty much
I
aware of that, but
know.
thank you.
So I wanted to make that clear.
Thank you, yeah. Okay, number 4.
Okay, so number 4, what I did was distribute the most recent expenditure report and revenue report. And so I thought we could go through the expenditure report first. It is the report that looks like this. What this report indicates is that these are the financial results through June, and we are just under 50% through the year, specifically 49.6% for just overall expenditures. But the number that's always really important to me is where are we relative to payroll, and payroll is 49.3%. And so it's a minor reduction, but it is a number and a percent that I always pay very close attention to, because it's an indicator of where the departments are going in regard to overtime. So as you can see, when you look to the far right on the bottom, on a year-to-date basis, overall, we are 49.8% through the year. So that means we are 0.3% on a bottom line basis over our budget. And that is actually very, very good, in my opinion, relative to where we are in the year. And the reason that I say that it is good is because a component of this financial statement represents encumbrances. And for those of you who are new to the committee, encumbrances is when you're making essentially accruals or set-asides that represent expenditures for the entire year. So from a timing perspective, we've accelerated some expenditures into this. So, when you look at it probably in November, some of those expenditures have been encumbered, but they won't be incurred till later. So on a bottom line basis, we're looking pretty good. But when you look at individual departments, which is what we do, there are some departments who exceed that percent that warrant additional analysis, and we go in and we look at those to determine, is this just a timing issue or is this indicative of a trend? So when we go down the list and we look at those that have a larger budget, a little bit larger of an overrun, I'll just highlight some of my observations and share them with you. The first one we'll talk about is the fire department, and they are at 50.6%. Now that's 1% over where we should be, and so it's always really important to understand why. And so if you recall, due to the budget overrun situation that we had in 2013, I asked the fire department to go in and encumber everything that they knew of for the whole entire year that would be an expenditure. And the reason why we did that was because we wanted to prevent what happened last year from happening this year. So that is hopefully just a timing issue. The next one is Health and Human Services. You can see that they're at 68.9%. And the reason why they are over budget is because of the timing issue associated with encumbrances. And then additionally, because many dollars, if you will, have been charged to operating that will be moved to grants. And so that accounting transaction just hasn't occurred yet.
Ms. Mahoney, can we back up for 1 minute? I just want clarification. The fire department, did you say that I know you said that you've asked them to encumber everything that they knew that was going to happen through year, and does this number reflect that or no?
It should reflect it.
Okay.
They were asked to do
great.
that.
Great.
I don't know that they did all of it.
Okay.
They were directed to do all of it, so it is something that we need to have a conversation and make sure they did it well.
Okay, thank you.
They do have accounting issues, so. Okay, so where are we? The next one would be the library. They're a little bit over, and again, actually the library, the municipal attorney, and the municipal manager are all over the 50%, and that is due to encumbrances. The same with the office of the mayor. The next one is the police department budget, and they're at 53.5%. And in this situation, they're tracking right now at 1% over their budget for labor and 6% for non-labor. And for them, they are having some challenges with their overtime in terms of managing it. In the first quarter of the year, there were some situations that caused their overtime to be higher, and Chief Mew has reined that in, and so he is optimistic that he'll be able to meet his year-end budget, but it is a challenge, and it's going to be a significant challenge for him to meet his budget. And so what we've decided to do is we're going to really watch it with these new controls that he's put in place. And it may be that in the fourth quarter, we may come to you for a fund balance appropriation for the police department because of their overtime. So in the long term, though, in terms of looking at the police department, they did hire out of their academy 20 additional recruits in May. And so that should help alleviate some of the overtime going forward. And then additionally, as you all know, there will be another academy in October. And bringing those recruits online also should help minimize the impact to the overtime. And so that's really it. It's the high-level review for expenditures.
Okay.
Any questions?
Right, before you go on, Amy first and then Mr. Tran.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Lucinda, I appreciate just the candid kind of high-level view, because some of the things that you point out, a lot of us hear, the overtime, And departments are telling us that they're gonna have challenges meeting their budget, specifically police and fire. So I do appreciate that. The one thing that I wanna I think I know the answer to, but I wanna articulate, as we're going through the percent of budget spent or uncovered, and we look at IT, it's down to 39.4, and you already know where I'm going. So is it because that's looking really good on paper because we've spread out the cost of SAP implementation between the different departments? Because everybody shares part of the burden of that implementation? Because I would expect IP being stretched as thin as they are, that would be much higher.
Well, what
Is that a clear question?
Yeah, no,
Okay,
it's a
wasn't
good question, because when I do the analysis of this, a budget way under is just as significant as a budget way over.
Sure.
I just don't highlight a lot of that here. But the reason why IT is under budget is a few reasons. One, they have a lot of vacancies, and they haven't filled them. And I suspect their labor as a percentage of their total will be higher in the last half of the year than the first half of the year, because a lot of their positions have now been posted. So there was a bit of a backlog in ER in regard to getting their positions posted, but I think that problem's been resolved. So that's one. And then two, we did anticipate that the large post-go-live SAP payment would occur in 2014, and that likely will not. And so, that's like $1 million right off the bat in regard to their non-labor. So that, there are some of those types of costs. Additionally, a lot of the higher maintenance fees associated with software, they usually bring those through in the latter part of the year. And so, that non-labor will go up.
So,
But I think they'll still come in under budget.
so unlike somebody like Department of Health and Human Services, where we know there's these specific grants, you can encumber them, you know what they're going to be. IT's not encumbering them early because they don't know yet. They're still, is that what you're?
No, I would say with them, a lot of them are known. They just haven't encumbered them. And I don't know if you've noticed, but they tend to put through a lot of their maintenance fees at the end of the year.
Sure.
And they just haven't encumbered them yet.
So, and you brought up, if I can just ask one more, you brought up employee relations, and this is a common theme that I've heard for the last year and a half is challenges. It seems like throughout the city, that's the bottleneck in getting people hired and getting things quickly done. I'm surprised that they're not really being stretched. It looks like they're totally fine when I look at this report as far as their budget. I would expect if they're really as short-manned as everybody's saying they are and there's such a bottleneck, I would expect their overtime costs would be splurging. What's going on there?
Well, let me look at ER. I think that they are over budget in regard to their overtime. Yeah, they are. They're way over budget. Their actuals for overtime are at $52,000 compared to a $14,000 budget, and you don't see that
I was
information.
going to say, I don't
Right,
see that
it's not
here.
here.
No, you don't see it because it's an additional handout.
Okay.
It will be in your booklets on Tuesday.
Okay.
Okay, and so I just didn't provide with you all the schedules. So yeah, they are running, okay, to answer your question, they are running overtime, they are pushing their staff, and there's reasons for that. One of them is SAP, and I can provide a little bit of information on a change that we made recently to help relieve that. But also, ER has really been getting jobs posted more quickly over the past 2 to 3 months. And a lot more positions have been posted, whereas before, like last year, the backlog was pretty long. This year, it's gotten better. We made a change on the SAP project in regard to the leadership recently to help address some of the backlog in ER. We changed out the project leader, and the reason was exactly, as you pointed out, was to try to minimize the impact to day-to-day operations. So the project manager in ER has been taken off SAP and is now doing pretty exclusive, just day-to-day work to get this hiring going.
I appreciate that, because what we see, it's like a ripple effect. But I do want to compliment ER. I mean, they got those additional paramedics up and noticed very, very quickly that we just recently had requested. So, it's nice. I mean, you only have so many bodies. You can only do so much. But at the same time, when you have a logjam like that, it does, I mean, you can see it in all the other departments. So I appreciate the proactive, relook at it. I mean, I don't know if proactive's the right word, but the look at it at this point, I do appreciate it.
And additionally, there will be an addenda item on the agenda for Tuesday to hire additional staff in both ER and in payroll. And we really want to, I guess at this point, bring on additional staff to really try to get on top of the payroll concerns as well as the backlog for the hiring in ER and the overall ability to support SAP.
Thank you.
So, Mr. Trainee, but before you go, can I make a comment on what Lisa just said? Okay, thank you. So you said there's going to be an addenda item to hire additional staff? Addendum, yeah, which probably means an appropriation. Yeah, how much?
I don't know.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Trainee?
Lucinda, going back to this sheet we've got here, the last one, 83.4%, real estate services.
Yes.
What's going on with the 83.4%? Is that just,
Yeah, that's, a lot of the leases are encumbered up front is one. And then, what was the name of the hotel that had the problems?
talking about the mushroom?
When they-
The timber.
Yeah, big timber.
Big timber, yeah. Okay, so we went in and we did a bunch of renovations there to make that livable for those families, so those costs were charged here. And so Tammy, the budget manager over there, believes that she can absorb those costs in her overall budget. And so what you see here is a timing issue associated with the additional costs for that. She thinks that by the end of the year, she'll be fine. But it's another one that we're watching, and fourth quarter, if she can't do it, then there will be an appropriation. So she's really challenging, trying to stay on budget, considering the amount that was spent on that, which
We
I
had no
don't.
choice for the big timber because it was a bed bug problem.
Absolutely.
Everything else is gone.
But it was unbudgeted. That was my point.
Thank you, Lucinda.
Any other questions? Okay, I have one more. All right. Chief Fiscal Officer, only 10.8%. Can you explain that? That's pretty good.
Efficient management.
All right then.
What we do in that department is we budget for the contributions, and specifically, if you remember in the first quarter budget, we plan to contribute money to the MOA trust, and so that contribution just hasn't been booked yet.
Okay, all right, thank you. Okay. Next.
Okay, the next one is the revenue report, and this report reflects, it's a little bit different than the expenditure report, because this is a budget versus actual report. This report here is a budget versus forecast report, okay, so it's a little bit different. And so this is the summary one, and you will receive all of the details for this one in your packets on Tuesday, but I thought I would just go through the highlights. And so the first category is taxes, and we are forecasting through year end to be up 1.7 million. And the largest variance here relates to property taxes, which is the fourth line item there, and I'll go through that first. We just recently received our personal property tax roll, if you will. This is something that is really difficult for us to forecast because it's self-reported from companies. And so it's up 1.1 million in regard to our forecast, largely because ConocoPhillips reported airport inventory parts this year. And so that was pretty significant in their overall self-assessment, and so it drove up the personal property tax portion. In regard to addressing your question, Mr. Trainee, tobacco tax, we are showing a decrease there, and that was due to a one-time tax refund. We talked about this last time, so you might recall it as I go through it. There was a payer who inadvertently put some inventory on their return that we don't tax, and so it was really just making a correction there. And it was something that was incorporated in the forecast. Additionally, there is, if I recall, and we have a graph on this, and it'll be in your packet. Actually, I could look it up. But I think that if I recall, there is a reduction in consumption that's going on, a downward trend. And that is also reflected in that number. But the biggest thing is the inventory. Another increase is really good in regard to room tax. And so room tax is going, and rental vehicle tax is going up. We are predicting that to go up $800,000. And the reason here is really good because the growth in the tourism is up double than what we forecasted. So we had forecast a 4% growth in this area when we did our budget, and the actuals are now at 8%. And it's a really great trend. The hotel tax is up 8% over last year for comparing the first 6 months of the year, and the rental car tax is up 10%. So that's really good news. It's a really good trend, and I think it's a really good reflection on the strength of our economy. In regard to construction revenues, even though they're going up a small amount here, it's really a mix of what's going on in between the categories in regard to building. So on a total overall basis, the permits are down 3%, but the mix of the permits is kind of interesting because commercial is down 22%, and these will be in your packets on Tuesday. Residential is up 16%, and government is up 56%. But when you net them all out, it's for an overall reduction of 3%. But it results in regard to the fees and the revenues, an additional $600,000. So again, this is good news, and it's a positive indication of our economy. Investment earnings, this is just a continuation of reduced interest rates, and this is just based on the performance of our investments. And then lastly, there's just some ups and downs going on in selected departments. Probably the noteworthy ones is the ambulance department fees. We're reporting right now that they're up $500,000, but I think that there's probably some more upside in that number. I think it could probably be closer to $1 million by the end of the year, because we've had good luck there. Alternatively, even though I say that there's an upside of $1 million, it really could come down depending on the write-offs, because the write-offs are evaluated in the accounting department on a quarterly basis. And so even though I say it's up, it could come down to in a manner that is unexpected. Another interesting thing going on is in public transit. You can see a reduction there. And if you remember, we increased the bus fares last year. And what's happened is we've had a 5% reduction in ridership. And so Lance is investigating that and looking at that to determine what's really going on here. So that is something to stay tuned for, to see what that yields. I want to provide one more follow-up comment on tobacco tax, and that is in regard to the trial. I mean, you know that we were all very involved with providing information for the smuggling operation that occurred, and the federal trial associated with that will be later this year, and we have submitted a claim for $1.2 million. And so hopefully we will get some recovery out of that, but I anticipate that the recovery won't occur in regard to a cash basis for us until 2015.
2015.
So on a bottom line basis, we're looking up $3 million, which is within 0.5% of our forecast. So that's good.
Any questions? Thank you, Ms. Mahoney. Okay, number 5, fund balance report.
Okay, so in regard to fund balance, as you know, fund balance is equal to revenues minus expenses. And you can see that the revenues are projected to be up. At this point, we're not predicting any negative impacts to expenditures. So fund balance is fine. I think that we're sitting fine for fund balance for the end of the year, unless something happens with the police department. But if something does, we know we've got a little bit of a push in regard to our revenues.
Any questions? Okay, I really appreciate you telling us that fund balance is fine, but, I sent this agenda out, in advance, and my hope was, and I apologize if I wasn't clear, to get a spreadsheet showing the numbers, not just that it's fine, but I'd really like to see a spreadsheet showing what the numbers are.
Whatever spreadsheet would be developed would be wrong. It is impossible at this point of time in the year to predict fund balance. It would be wrong.
Okay, I am not talking about the surplus or whatever you want to call it for 2014. I'm talking about the current municipality of Anchorage's fund balance. The 5 largest funds is what my biggest concern is.
Yeah, the numbers.
That's what I'm talking about. I'm not talking about what's going to be left
Oh, okay.
at the
Well,
end of the
I'll
year.
report it right now. It's $79.3 million.
Okay, thank you for that, but I would really like to see a spreadsheet, so if you can prepare that.
It's in the CAF room.
Okay.
Because I'll have a copy of it.
I would
If you would
really-
like me to copy the page, I'll be glad to do that.
I really appreciate you offering to copy the page, but in the past, you've done a spreadsheet that showed the breakdown from fund balance for each of the 5 largest funds, and I would really appreciate seeing that again.
Sure.
Okay, thank you very much, I appreciate it. Any other comments from anybody on the fund balance? Okay, thank you. Okay, number 6, you asked to have us come visit. I'm really glad you did. It gives us kind of a heads up to what we're going to deal with on Tuesday.
Right. So what you'll see on Tuesday is an AR and an AM that is proposing a change to the calculation of the fund balance policy. So the fund balance policy calculation currently is based on revenues. So what we do is within the 5 major funds, we take them and we multiply them by 10% to determine what our bond set aside is. And then we look and do another 2 to 3% calculation to set aside some money for working capital. So over the years, we've used this calculation, but it is not the calculation that Standard & Poor's and Fitch use in order to determine how we fit relative to our bond rating, okay? What they do is they calculate based on expenditures, not based on revenues. And our current calculation that is identified in our policy is a revenue number less any of the MUSA-MESA payments. The MUSA-MESA payments are about $35 million. So you have a revenue number, you take off your MUSA-MESA payments, and then you have the remaining balance where the fund balance is multiplied from. If we continue with that calculation going forward, we will be shorting our fund balance by about $4 to $5 million a year, okay? And it would be a very bad situation because what it will do is when we move into the next era where there are no more surpluses, which is what we've delivered over the last 5 years, and we're in a mode where we're doing our fund balance calculations and it's with no surplus, we're going to be $4 million short in terms of even meeting our own stated policy. So what would happen then would be negative consequences from our rating agents, and it would most likely result within 2 years of a negative outlook and eventually a bond downgrade. And so we have a one-time opportunity to get this fixed, which is right now. We have surplus money. Well, we have some cushion, if you will, in our current fund balance because of TAPS money. And so if we make the change to align our fund balance calculation to the same as what is calculated by Standard & Poor's and Fitch, then as we learn from the Supreme Court in terms of their ruling, which I think will be very favorable to us, we will have the funding cushion to make this change, and it would not have an impact to taxes next year. And this is all about next year, okay? And so that is, it's pretty simple in terms of just making the change.
Mr. Trainee?
How is ASD going to handle the investment? Because you're required to have fund balance and all this set aside. So how is this going to impact their next year?
It does not impact them at all. They currently have a policy of 10%, and they calculate their policy, I believe, based on expenditures, maybe revenues, but they are pretty balanced in regard to that, and they don't have that MUSA calculation deviation that we have.
This won't affect them at all?
No,
Okay.
no, because we would keep it at 10%. And they're at 10%, we're essentially 12 to 13%.
Any questions? I have a question. So, Ms. Mahoney, you mentioned, I think it was in an email, that the recommendation to change our policy came from our financial advisor, Southwest.
It's supported by our financial advisor, yes.
Okay. Did they give you a letter, a written support?
They provided written support, I believe it was 2 years ago, in regard to the fund balance change then. This was a verbal conversation.
Oh, the verbal conversation. Okay. So are the percentages going to change? Like right now it's 10% and then 2 to 3. Is the recommendation that those percentages change?
I did not incorporate a percentage change in the document.
Right, I
that you
saw
have,
that.
But they should change.
To what?
They should change to 15%.
15%? From 10 to 15?
No, it should change from 13 to 15.
You're talking about the total amount? Okay.
That's what it should be.
Okay, so if we can break that down, okay, 10% for bond rating right now, so what's the increase for bond rating? You gave me a total increase for both, for bond rating and the capital part, okay, which is now 13%, and you just said 15%, so my question is, okay, it's 10% for bond rating right now.
Right, it's 10% for bond, and we do 2 to 3 for working capital.
Right.
But if you guys are interested in really doing this right, which would be to make it to 15%, I would recommend 12% for bond and then 3% for working capital.
Okay, that's why I'm asking.
Yeah,
Okay.
that's what I would recommend.
Thank you very much, I appreciate it. Any questions from anyone? Okay, thank you very much, Ms. Mahoney. And we're at number 7, and I want to thank Shirley, I can't remember your last name.
Nelson.
Shirley Nelson, who's the chair of the VAC, for being at our meeting today. And I don't know if you had a chance to look at our draft work plan, but part of our work plan is to work closely with the Budget Advisory Commission. And one of the ways we're going to do that, or we intend to do that, is to hopefully have your attendance or your designee at every single one of our meetings to give a report on what the VAC is doing in your monthly meetings, briefly, of course. And also, right now we're in the process of hiring an assembly budget analyst, and that person will be attending your meetings to be able to report back to the committee also. So with that said, you have the floor.
Thank you. And thank you very much for including us in here, as I think it is important, and we have put a lot of time into this organization commission. As you know, it is a private citizen and just an advisory commission, and we do put a lot of time. So as chair, what I've hoped to do with this commission is I just wanted to keep it very to the point, so I directed the commission when we break out and do reports that we keep it purpose-driven and we know what we're taught, our goal is, our objective. And we want to look at cost savings and expenses and see if we can just be studying that even more. But even more, the third step on that is to come up with solutions and recommendations, not just that here's the problem. Perhaps we can make some good recommendations as to what we have been studying and so on. And so I've reached out to a few members and stuff to see if there's anything that you would like us to do as a commission and focus on. Jennifer Johnston has returned a call, and I can't remember all 5, but there were 5 departments that had cost savings, and she would like us to study those. And I recall 3 of them, Parks and Rec, IT, and ML&P, just to see what is the factor there. So there's 4 on our commission that are interested in that, and they are just starting to put that together right now. So we're studying at what are the cost savings? things, and perhaps we can see a little bit more what's going on. As far as the school district, we are still closely working with them. I go to their meetings, budget meetings. We are waiting currently for the enrollment figure, and that will play a big part in their budget. And I think one thing also we're wanting to pay a little close attention to, and I'm working with Pat Higgins on this, is the audit. And I think that was done over the course of the past few years, but it doesn't get talked about, and I think it needs to come back out in the open on what are the findings and where is it. And so I know he's put directives to the superintendent, Ed Graff, as to getting back some information, and it's been a little bit slow in coming because everyone is so busy and stuff, but we're very interested in seeing that and what did come out of it. And then probably thirdly, we have been working on tax exemptions. There are a lot of exempt properties in Anchorage, and so we have been looking at that. And we know it's a sensitive subject, but we're just studying it. There's a lot of exemptions. And also, just recently, we started looking at perhaps senior citizen exemptions, because that's $20+ million. And that affects the budget. So we do want to look a little bit closer at that, to just study it and to see. And I know that the state mandates the program, and so perhaps we might need to be making recommendations to the state, that if they mandate it, maybe they need to fund more. So, and that is a substantial amount of money to go into the budget. So if there are any questions and anything that you would like us to be looking at, I really appreciate the opportunity, and we do want to work closely with you, and I'll try to make as many meetings as I can as well.
Mr. Trainee?
Just when you look at the tax exempt property, if you break it down by state mandates, because there's a whole lot of categories where the state mandates, you must give an exemption. And I think some of that needs to be addressed at the state level, trying to address the process. Because there
Correct.
seems to be no rhyme or reason. If they get enough legislators and the governor agrees with them, it goes off our tax rolls. So if you'd look at that, I appreciate it.
Right.
Ms. Dombrowski?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I just want to say that I used to serve on this commission, so I guess I've had a little more exposure than some members, but it's been very interesting to me to watch the level of discussion and just the dueling opinions on the commission, and not just that, but just the different problem solving. So I would recommend members of this committee at least 1 or 2 times just to sit in and listen to their meeting, because I think you'll find, I know sometimes there's a reputation for one perception, but when you get in there and listen, you recognize you don't have, how many people are on the commission, 9 or 10?
11.
You don't have 11 people that think the same. There are some very different opinions on here, and it's interesting. And Shirley is a teacher, and so she brings an education perspective that I think is really valuable to a commission that talks about budgets, because she can see firsthand how it affects classrooms. So anyways, I just put that out there. They meet the first Wednesday of each month.
First Wednesday of every month, and
So-
we would love to have.
Yeah, if anybody, if anybody shows up, like I said, last meeting, they were talking about that tax exempt stuff, Dick, and.
Bill's the other one.
Oh, yeah, Dick, and it was interesting to see, just the level of discussion in the weeds, and Lucinda was there, so, I mean, there was a lot of discussion. It was just fascinating, so I just encourage members to, if you pop into one of these meetings, kind of see what they do.
Please.
Thank you, Ms. Dombrowski. I've been to meetings in the past, but not for a long time, and I'm going to definitely look at my schedule to see if I can attend your meetings.
Please.
And I really do appreciate you being here. But one question, when you talk about the school district audit, are you talking about the annual financial audit?
No, they did an internal audit, right?
Okay, the internal one, okay,
Mhm.
thank you. And then, one of the BAC's goals that you mentioned was finding cost savings.
Correct.
And if you looked at our draft work plan, that's number 7 for
Okay.
us too. So I would really anticipate our staff and the committee working with the Budget Advisory Commission on this particular issue, because it's definitely one of our goals, and it was way back in 2009 when I was chair of this committee. So thank you very much for that. And also, if you look at number 12, it's one of the biggest reasons why I wanted the involvement, once again, of the BAC. So I'm really, really happy that you're here.
Thank you.
Any questions before we move on? Okay, last item on the agenda is our committee, the work plan. And like I mentioned in the email, thank you so much for having trust me that everything was just fine, because I spent some time this past week and making quite a few changes, and I think they're pretty good changes. And what's highlighted in red are two purposes that we can just implement and start working on right now, and that's why I highlighted them red. And the others are, we're going to work towards them, but when we get some staff to help us do our job, because that's really, really important, not only important, but also necessary. And one other thing that's different than what you have in your hand is, let me see which one. Bear with me a second. Okay, number 2. I had a conversation with Mr. Steele, and I was really happy to have that conversation. But anyway, I changed the action plan to read, the Assembly Budget Analyst will review and analyze the annual ASD budget and make recommendations to the budget finance. Oh, wait a minute, that's the wrong one. I had the right one. Okay. Sorry about that. Yeah. I changed number 2 to read, the Assembly Budget Analyst will review and analyze the annual ASD budget and provide a summary to the Budget Finance Committee. After committee review, the summary will be presented to the Assembly and the School Board in a joint meeting prior to approval of the ASD budget. And I think it's really important that we spend time looking at the school district's budget along with our staff, because first of all, we are responsible for approving the budget, even though it's just the upper limit, but we're still responsible for approving their budget, and we need to understand what their budget is all about. And we also appropriate the funds. So this is part of our charge as the legislative branch of government. So I thought it was really important to once again include this level of summary on the ASD budget and our work plan. So with that said, please let's, I'm open for comments and changes or edits, whatever, so that we can move on and have a document to help us do our job.
Are comments back to them going to be of specific items in their budget, or is it going to be on the overall budget?
On the overall budget, I would suspect, because just like the general government budget, our review is the entire budget. Mr. Bosky?
And I know Mr. Steele won't like to hear me say this, but I think all bets are on the table. If I want to make a specific comment, I will.
You can make a comment.
Oh, I will.
You know, and-
I will.
Yeah.
But I know.
No, it's very appropriate for
Yeah.
us to make comments, but I'm just saying, it's their responsibility and it's our responsibility to approve the improvement.
Right, and if I can add on,
And they have
To influence
they have
their-
funding from a lot of sources. It's not just
Right.
municipal funding, and so.
No, I understand that, but and the only thing I'll say to this is there's this mentality that we're not allowed to meddle, and what it comes down to is we have a responsibility to the overall government, and if that means we see an opportunity to make a recommendation or affect change in a positive manner, whatever tack that means, I'll take it.
and
We'll see how it works.
I want to follow up with Mr. Bosky's comments, okay? How we feel personally about the school district's budget, is how we feel personally, all right? For me, my whole intent is to do our job. That's it, okay? And even though the school board and the superintendent, they build the budget and the school board approves their budget, at that level, at this level, according to the charter and the code, it's our responsibility to approve their budget. Whether you want to say, well, we only approve the upper limit, it really doesn't matter. Because for me, if I'm going to approve anything to do with anybody's budget, I'm going to understand what I'm approving. And so that's my only intent
We
here.
should understand.
Oh, absolutely, and we appropriate funds. And when the school district budget is revised, we're the ones who approve that revision. So I think it's important for all of us to understand where I'm coming from as the chair of this committee. Okay. Any other comments, Mr. Bosky?
Thank you so much. I just want to say I appreciate the work and the thoughtfulness that has gone into this. And I'm very excited to see a proactive budget and finance committee. So and be part of that. So I just want to say thank you.
You're welcome. Any other comments? Mr. Peterson?
I was just wondering, we had mentioned earlier that we are looking to recruit a new assembly budget analyst. Have we listed that position as?
Ms. Jones is working on that.
Right. Ms. Jones, would you like to make some comments on that? Thank you very much.
We posted the position, and I will tell you that Employee Relations posted it quite quickly. One of the requirements, you have to have an approved position description, and the position description was current within the last 2 years. So it got posted quite quickly. It is required to be posted for 7 days. It was, and it closed recently. I've reviewed, there were 11 applicants. I've reviewed the applicants, and I've set up interviews with the 3 that were the best qualified. They have degrees in finance or accounting or something in that area, which was one of the requirements. And they also have government accounting experience, which was also one of the other requirements. So we have interviews with 3 of them set up tomorrow afternoon. And Patrick Flynn, Assembly Chair Patrick Flynn, appointed an interview committee, and it is me, Assembly Member Elby Gray Jackson, and Assembly Member Jennifer Johnston. So we'll be interviewing tomorrow. Okay.
Thank you. Any other questions?
I have a comment, if I could, please.
Sure.
So I think it's really important to note that these duties that have been described here for the budget analyst in the Assembly Department cannot be done by one person. So if you vote to approve this, you would probably be voting to add headcount, because a lot of the functions here are functions that are staffed in the finance organization that it takes many people to do, and would be a duplication of effort. And, if that is the intention, that is fine, but you should just recognize that it would be an increase in staff to accomplish these tasks.
When I looked at that thought came in my head, but I just looked at it like somebody who's going to facilitate pulling all this information together. So though this person is assigned to, let's see, review and analyze the ASD budget, make recommendations, I would assume they would work with the CFO of the ASD, and that's what I assumed. I wasn't planning on adding a whole nother department. I'm just looking at somebody who can basically gather data, bring it together in a succinct manner, and then present it to us.
Right.
Is that what your intent was?
Thank you. Ms. Mahoney, I really appreciate your comments, and my intent is not to hire more staff, although it would be really, really nice for the Assembly to have more staff to help us do our job. But when I was chair of the Budget Committee in 2009, I worked really closely with the finance folks of that administration. And I think at that time, we didn't even have a budget analyst, but we got the work done, a lot of it that was presented in the work plan, until my position was given to another Assembly member. With that said, I think that the comments that you just made, Mr. Bosky, are absolutely correct, and is my intent. Mr. Training?
Just that when I first came on the Assembly, we had a budget analyst that worked very hard for us and did exactly this. And she's sitting right there.
So
we
I
had
would
a
just like
budget analyst that
to
worked
point
with
out,
us.
excuse me, I'm sorry.
Are you going, Mr. Chairman?
That's it.
Thank you. Ms. Mahoney?
No, I mean, I think this is really good. I'm not trying to be critical. I'm just pointing out that on item number 1, the Assembly Budget Analyst will review agenda items to verify fund certification, revenue sources, and expenditure levels, and compliance with municipal code and policies and procedures for general government and enterprise. Okay, to do that, for every item on the Assembly agenda, I have 3 people in the Controller's Department that do this almost on a full-time basis before the agenda goes out. So in order for the budget analyst in the Assembly Department to accomplish that, I mean, first of all, I don't know how they could without, first of all, we would need to change the routing and pace, and then they would need to be on the agenda for pace for, the sequence of doing that. And then they would need to be able to go into every single agenda item, log into PeopleSoft, determine if the fund balance, or determine if an expenditure budget is available, look at the revenues, understand the account code. I mean, there's a lot to this task, and if you're going to ask a budget analyst to do that, if they're going to do what this says, that is what it would take. And so, and maybe that's not your intent, okay, and if that's not the intent, then I would just suggest that maybe you reword it and say, they will review select agenda items, but not every agenda item. That's something that you could consider, and then you might want to provide guidance on what select would mean. Maybe it's just one that's associated with fund balance appropriations, or something to that extent, because, you know, our agenda items can
Right.
be really long.
Right. If I can follow up, thank you, Ms. Mahoney, for your comments, but my intent is, you know, this is the Budget and Finance Committee, to only look at agenda items that have fund certs, and not every single agenda item is a fund certification document. There are quite a few, but they all aren't. And this process used to happen in the past with one person. And maybe, there may be a little bit of areas in here that may be a little bit, I don't want to use the word extreme, but this is what used to happen in the past. Oh, yeah, with the Sydney staff, and I know it. Thank you for your comments, I really appreciate it, Ms. Mahoney. Any comments from anyone else? Okay, well, with that said, I mean, adjourned. Thank you, everyone.